Well, a couple months ago, Greg Deason, the pastor of spiritual formation here, was passing me in the hall, and he did what he normally does. Mitchell. I said, yes. He said, cinnamon crunch bagel, Panera bread. It's good. I said, yes, sir. So, that was just in the back of my mind until Monday this week when Susan and I were getting our car serviced. We decided to go have lunch together at Panera Bread. And on my way out, I saw the sign, Cinnamon Crunch Bagel, 69 cents. And I thought the words of Greg Deason. And so I got two. And I asked them if it'd be okay if they'd be good tomorrow. And they said, yeah, just don't slice them. So I roll them up in my nice little brown bag. And I put them, when I get home, right there on the counter. And I was doing a charity auction that night at the Grand Wayne Center for March of Dimes. And we would sell these chefs would come to your home and cook dinner for you. And I was thinking about the food that was going to be there. And I just thought, you know what? I'll just eat one of those Cinnamon Crunch bagels now. And I won't eat anything else then before I auction. And then when I come home, I'll have the other one in the morning. So I take a bite, my first bite of the Cinnamon Crunch Bagel. And the very first words out of my mouth were, Susan! And I had to run to the other end of the house. And I said, Susan. She goes, what? I go, this is one of the best things I have ever put in my mouth. She goes, really? I go, I can't hardly describe it. So I eat my Cinnamon Crunch Bagel from Panera Bread, and I go do my auction, and on my way back, I'm listening to praise and worship music, I think, and it was either that or a tape, and I'm listening, and I'm thinking, oh, there's one more Cinnamon Crunch Bagel, and he ain't gonna survive till the morning. So I go in the house, because I didn't eat anything at that chef's thing, and I come to that little brown bag, and in front of that little brown bag is now a piece of paper that wasn't there before. And it's a note from Susan that says, sorry. And I opened up the bag, and it was gone. And so I wrote a note of my own and took it back to her. And I started being the evangelist for Cinnamon Crunch Bagels at Panera Bread. And I start telling everybody for like the next 2 days. Well, it's funny, Susan and I were passing in the bathroom on a Thursday morning I'm thinking about, how am I going to get another Cinnamon Crunch Bagel? I hadn't had one yet. And I'm passing Susan in the bathroom, and she goes, I was just thinking, your mom's playing tennis by Panera Bread today. I'm going to see if she'll get us some Cinnamon Crunch Bagels. So we're all thinking about it all the time. So my mom gets them and brings them back, and it's Friday. And I'm working on this talk Friday, and I'm decided I'm going to have one of those Cinnamon Crunch Bagels, and I now got like 6 of them. And I'm eating one, and I'm leaving Greg Deason these messages about how good they are, and multiple. And I tell him, I leave this one message that says, in the law of economics, there's this diminishing marginal returns concept. Not true, man, with this. And I said, this is an oxymoron. Cinnamon Crunch Bagel. It's like diet cinnamon roll. I don't think it's a bagel. But anyway, they appear mysteriously in my mailbox. I've been telling everybody, people starting to give them to me. So I'm sitting there in my house, and I'm putting the second one down. And a Bible verse comes to my mind. Psalm 34:8, I think. Taste and see that the Lord is good. And then another one came to my mind, and that was Proverbs 4:23, and that is, above all else, guard your heart. And you know what? I had given my heart to those Cinnamon Crunch Bagels, and my stomach was hurting, and I OD'd on them, and it just reminds me of my dad about 5 or 6 years ago. Was given his heart in a way that he shouldn't. And he was my best friend, my business partner, and my dad. And I knew that this decision would have some ramifications that would be negative toward me, because I knew that this decision did not honor God. And I had an auction in January in Orlando, and a friend of mine who worked for Bill Bright, founder of Campus Crusade for Christ, was responsible for the 4 spiritual laws and millions of people coming to Christ through God's work through him. My friend called and said, would you like to meet with Bill while you're here for the auction? I said, yes. So I met with Bill, and I had these list of theological questions. And when I was ready to go up to his office or to this room where we were going to meet, I went in, I told him, I said, I got these lists of theological questions. He goes, let's go. Shoot. And I said, but I can't ask him. And he goes, why? And my heart started to break, and I started to share with him what was going on in my life and with my dad and how difficult it was, and I just wanted his wisdom. And I got to tell you, this man was so vulnerable, so loving, so caring. He made me feel like I was the only person on the planet. And I couldn't help but think when I left how much he reminded me of my dad. And at that moment in time, my dad was relying on his giftedness, and Bill Bright was relying on his godliness. And not convenient for this message, but I really did think when I left Bill Bright's office that I had truly met a man after God's own heart. And that's what I want to talk about today is David, a man after God's own heart. It's bookended in his life that he's a man after God's own heart. At the beginning and at the end of his life, Scripture records that David is a man after God's own heart. And the heart, just for the purposes of this talk, I want you to understand that we're defining heart as your entire inner being, its direction, the direction of your entire inner being. King David. His name prompts many titles to mind: shepherd, warrior, king, father, husband, poet, musician, architect, worshiper. But running parallel to that list is another that includes adulterer, manipulator, murderer, conquering a real live giant, devastating military foes, evading the lethal jealousy of his country's most powerful man. David's story provides enough twisted drama to make soap opera writers envious and country music singers blush. Yet nearly 1/4 of the Old Testament is devoted to this hero of the faith, described, as I said, bookended in his life, peaks and valleys life. He's described as a man after God's own heart. And I just want to find out today with you, discover with you today, what is that? What is a man or a woman after God's own heart? Is it a title reserved for an exclusive audience of one? Or can a sinner like me be a man or a woman after God's own heart? And the first thing that we see about David is a man after God's own heart leans on God like a shepherd. David was a shepherd. He was young. He had a slingshot in hand. He had a rod that you would toss to realign sheep if they were getting out of line. He had this staff, which was a 6 foot long, the curved thing with the handle that he would put his hand on, and that would gently guide the sheep to keep them. He would protect them in the pastures of Israel. At night, David and other shepherds would actually lie down, protecting the sheep inside a cave from animals outside the cave. He would actually lay down his life and be the sheep gate or the sheep door. A lot of times, shepherds would put all their sheep together in pens, and then the next morning, all they would have to do is make the sound of their voice, and their sheep would come running to the respective shepherds, because sheep know the voice of the shepherd. And the shepherd would never let sheep out of his sight, because in Israel it's rocky and there are cliffs, and a sheep can fall over a shorter cliff and get caught in a briar patch. And if that would ever happen, the shepherd carries the lamb over his shoulders like you've seen in pictures and bring him to safety. And with his family's livelihood at stake, guarding their 1000 BC stock portfolio and retirement fund from bears and lions, David gets time to know and be known by God. He prays. He recites parts of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. He meditates. And for a healthy climate with water that fosters fresh green pastures, he trusts in the only one who can truly protect him, the one who gave him his first victory over the bear and the lion. And he knows him as Yahweh, God, his shepherd. Sheep trust in their shepherd, but a shepherd like David trusts in the shepherd, in God, because God is faithful. And it's in this setting that Samuel finds the one God has chosen, because he has searched the hearts of men and boys to find a heart that was fully committed to him. If you want to jot down 2 Chronicles 16:9, says that God does that God searches for hearts who are fully committed to him. And this is where we find Samuel the prophet, who's responding from a message from God, who said, I'm going to take the kingdom away from King Saul, who's foolish and not obeyed my commands, and I'm going to give it to a man after my own heart, 1 Samuel 13:14. So if you turn to 1 Samuel 16, Samuel catches up with David. And in verse 6, just going to read a couple verses here. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord. He thought that the oldest brother would be the one who was going to be anointed king. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. And here's what you hear all the time on the radio, and you hear people quote this. 1 Samuel 16:7, the Lord does not look at the things man looks at. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart, the direction of my entire inner being. And you go down to verse 13 there. Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. Only they saw this anointing. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came upon David in power.